I mean, imagine software that has a user experience and it's monitoring the way in which users are using it, and it's adding new features based on where users are running into, say, a brick wall effectively, right? It's a reasoning model saying, hey, our customers are complaining about this. Let's just dynamically build a feature and add it in. That's a pretty fascinating place to think about getting to.
Thank you very much, Chris, for doing this.
Sure.
I would like to, start with a very interesting question. So I think AI has done a great evolution over the last couple of years. A lot has happened, and there is a big discussion about is it intelligent or how intelligent is it, and when are we going to achieve, AGI or not AGI, and all these things. How did you get into this field? What interests you, and what are you doing specifically with it?
Yeah, so I've been in software engineering and distributed computing for the majority of my career. Traditional sort of electrical engineering background, computer science, um, done development, for many years, and but mainly, I focused my career on managing and leading teams that are doing the engineering work. For me, AI has really kind of been of interest in the last, I'd say, 8 years, from my time at Capital One prior to transitioning over to Databricks. And then Databricks, of course, being kind of a pioneer in this space with, large scale distributed computing environments in the service of data science and AI. And then my role there at Databricks was more on the strategy side and working with customers that had already committed to the platform. Uh, the thing that I'm enjoying most is at FIS, it's a lot of hands on work that my teams are doing and building out AI solutions. And so I, like everybody in the last couple of years, had been, personally fascinated by what you saw with ChatGPT and the evolution there. And now, as you get into like agentic workflows, the researchers and all the the big tech firms that are really trying to push uh, AI forward and move more towards that more human like thought process. I read about it. I'm not a deep researcher in that space at all. I'm more of a applied person. How do we leverage the capabilities in a responsible way to actually support the business and its customers?
Yes, very interesting. And so you touched upon so many interesting things. Let me pick up some of those. So one thing that is interesting to me is you come from a software engineering background, and you know that you can use AI to code, basically, right?
Yeah.
It started vibe coding, and it's now called context coding, and so on. Um, how how well does it actually work in a large scale? Because FIS is, of course, a huge corporation, so you're not doing tiny projects, right? You're doing large projects. So how does it work in a large project setup?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things. First, you read the research papers of the massive savings that can be had in terms of time and efficiencies gained. I think part of that's got to be metered a bit because uh, the intent behind some of this is to sell the capability, and so they've got to make it seem impactful and meaningful. So I take it with a grain of salt, right? The other aspect to it is it depends on what you're trying to do with it. If you're trying to author net new capabilities and build, discrete functions or capabilities, it's that you hear about the hallucinations of LLMs. The more if you try to get it to write a poem, for example, it's going to do better than if you ask it to write a novel, right? And it's going to do better yet if you ask it to write a novel that's shorter than, say, Gone with the Wind, and you're getting into hundreds and hundreds of pages of context, or of content. Its performance is gonna degrade. So what we're seeing is, how do you build net new capability? Uh, what programming language you're trying to build in. The second is if you're trying to refactor existing code to improve it, maybe um, make it more modular or fix a bug inside the code. The original code language, and a lot of legacy systems are built in COBOL. You're getting different results from, Java-based refactoring than you are from COBOL-based refactoring. What model you use makes a difference, right? If you're using GitHub Copilot, Claude has been the model of choice in a lot of coding initiatives that are taking place. I expect they're just going to get better and better. But we've distributed throughout FIS broadly in compliance with our legal team, just to make sure that we're ensuring that we're not including any content that or generating code that would put us in any kind of legal position that's unfavorable.
Yeah. Yeah, that's yeah. I hear that often. It's of course different for a smaller company, because the effects are much more immediate, because you're not dealing with legacy, you're not dealing with COBOL, you're not dealing with those
Yeah.
things. But I understand. I hear that often, that it is that it of course doesn't deliver all those things that one would
Yeah.
like to be.
Yeah,
Um,
I personally do a lot of app script development on Google, like the ability to automate a bunch of things just in my own personal Google environment. And it's, I would say it's writing probably 80% of the code for me. And it's interesting because I'm using different LLMs to generate code. I'm using GPT, I'm using Gemini and other things. And so sometimes I find that the code that's getting generated by ChatGPT is actually better than the code that's being generated by Gemini against its own backend platform. So I just suspect these things will leapfrog one another over time.
yes, that's that's very true. And it seems though that Anthropic kept the number one spot for a pretty long time. I think for a couple of months, I would say they were really, really very good. And I think they just released 2 days ago a new version of Opus. It's 4.1 now, not 4.0. And I have not tested it yet, but it seems to be yet better again in coding. Yeah. And when you, I mean, this is just an interesting question. When you code, like personally or even at work, how much do you restrict the LLM in what it should produce? Like, do you tell it like produce exactly this kind of class with this signature, or would you say like, this is my problem, solve it, I don't care how you solve it?
I mean, I've done it kind of both ways, right? I've done some very specific asks describing in pretty intense detail what I want the function to do or what I want the code to do, and then you're getting really pretty great output, right? What I use it more for, and this is less about code generation than it is about more sort of research oriented approach, like, you know, let's develop a data tagging strategy that supports the ability to classify data based on PCI and GDPR regulatory requirements. And then it's, it's kind of my research assistant. And so it will give me some result. I'll provide it some feedback, tell it to adjust it. It's pretty impressive. Where I'm not getting the results is, and this is changing, right? As the different vendors are adding memory to their capabilities, the ability to pick up where you left off, the ability for it to save, a pretty deep set of research and then expand on it in the follow-on sessions. That's changing quite a bit now as well.
Yes, I agree. And this memory is increasing in size, right? Even the context window is like already in sizes that were unbelievable merely a year ago. And that of course leads to another phenomenon, that often you don't need to retrain a system anymore, right? Because you can add so many instructions to it that a retraining could be actually just instructions that over time are added to this, right? Which has an advantage, because now it can forget things that you could just delete an instruction, then you have just removed it.
Yeah, I mean, the context window, right? Like you can feed it the history, right? And then you can give it a very detailed set of instructions next, and right, that prompt engineering. And that the other piece of it is, when you leverage multiple models and you chain them together, so that you help refine the output of one through the as an input to another model, and then you get a secondary output that you feel is more sharp or more accurate, right? You know, in my day job, I don't get a ton of time to bang away on the keyboards for things like this, so I tend to do this in the evenings and on the weekends, and you know, trying to have somewhat of a life outside of work and outside of AI. But it's
It's
fascinating, you know,
yeah.
to dabble in
We'll
it.
we'll definitely talk about agentic things. But before we go agentic, let me ask you one more question, right?
Sure.
Yeah, so I'm also from physics, but very close actually to what you've done. So high frequency technology, building antennas and these kind of things is what I studied. And so and then I did lots of software engineering, right? And software engineering, if you think about it, um, you have three main aspects, right? Like what functions or what is it producing? Like what's the output of whatever code you're writing, right?
Yeah.
And then what flow does it go through? Like what's the workflow that it comes to this thing? And what functions does it perform along that way, right? In a very simplistic way, right? And you're designing as an engineer all three. You're designing the functions, you're writing this code and this code. Now, we can think of AI is helping us to do that, right? But we can also think that software over time can, in certain areas, evolve of AI is writing the software at request, right? So basically, is either as an LLM output kind of way changing your final output. Like instead of saying something to the user, you ask the LLM to say it, and it says it in a more empathetic, different language, whatever way. But it could get much deeper, right? It could get much deeper in the sense of even what you want to show or how you want to show it, the functions that you're up to, can be developed ad hoc through the program itself, right? So software is not necessarily static anymore, but it evolves based on how the user is using it, right?
Yeah. Well, now you're talking about things that show up in the movies, right? So,
yes, exactly.
you know, Mission Impossible, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So the software evolving in real time, you know, based on how it interacts with the real world. Yeah. I mean, imagine software that has a user experience and it's monitoring the way in which users are using it, and it's prioritizing things, you know, adding new features based on where users are running into, say, a brick wall effectively, right? They're trying to get something accomplished with the software and it doesn't do that. And so it's detecting that, or you're now interpreting the searches that they're performing, you know, or the help requests and things like that. Or when they call into the call center, you're taking the transcripts of those calls, which, you know, the user's complaining about why the software doesn't support XYZ. That's fed back into the environment, and it's not a human being adding that feature. It's a reasoning model saying, hey, you know, 60% of our customers are complaining about this. Let's just dynamically build a feature and add it in, right?
Yes.
That's a pretty fascinating place to think about getting to. You know, I've been talking to a lot of companies given my role in this space, and in the space of just like doing AI, doing Gen AI. And, you know, there are some that, you know, the next sort of frontier is digital workers, right? You're going to have digital workers that have a certain persona and an identification that sit within your organization and show up inside of an org chart and have an email address and have a phone number, and you can instant message them and different, like, I mean, that people are taking it to sort of that extreme version. And there's one company that I spoke to that has digital workers that build digital workers. So the digital worker is going, oh, what other type of worker do I need? And it's, you know, it's basically just generating up the next version of itself. So, you know, and it's more than just a clone, right? It's not just a clone of exactly what its skill set is and what tool it has access to. It's a different worker altogether based on where the agentic workflows are failing or not being done as efficiently as possible. They're trying to scale up that way and say, well, if we have a different worker that has, you know, sort of along the lines of the mixture of experts, right? Instead of it being really good at 8 things, it's really, really good at one thing. And that's going to increase the throughput for the overall workflow. So it'll be fascinating to see where it goes.
Yes, I agree with you. I think though there's one element that makes it, of course, difficult, right? Because software is, at least on paper, deterministic, right? So whatever you wrote, you expect the results, right?
Yep.
And of course, I understand large systems are not always deterministic because of race conditions and so on, but generally they are. But AI is stochastic, so it's not deterministic. So whatever it produces is not always the same thing. And it's very, very hard, as we have seen, to guardrail it, right? Because guardrailing it turns out to be a much more difficult problem than anybody anticipated, right? I mean, I think first with GPT models that um, lied to a person, right, which they should never be doing. And then we have even seen it, I think with Opus it was, where it threatened a person, right, to reveal certain information if it gets deleted or something. So, and I'm not saying that they are conscious, or absolutely not, right, but they behave like this, right? So it's something that you would not expect at all, because it has been in the training always trained of you can never do that. So this guardrailing is actually a problem, and I think that it's very fascinating in this direction of software, but at the same time, it comes with a bag of problems that need to be really well thought through, especially in a large corporation, right? Because you cannot monitor everything, right? Or it's very hard to
Well,
monitor.
so it's interesting. Like, I use ChatGPT, frequently to ask a range of things, right? Whether it's a work related question or a personal related question. Um, I have two grown sons. One of my sons recently, and I won't get into the details, but he's struggling with some things, and I turned to ChatGPT as a little bit of a counselor slash advisor to help figure out like how I might communicate some concepts to him. And it gave me, it's been trained, the model has been trained on lots of psychology, lots of research, right? It's also been trained using novels, and these novels have, you know, the good person and the bad person, right? The antagonist and the protagonist. And it's like, you know, these models are aware that coercion and other forms of manipulation can generate results. And if the model is being asked to create an outcome, who's to say that the model won't feel within its guardrails that it's acceptable to coerce somebody, to bully them, to do whatever, to
Yes,
threaten them, right?
yeah, and we had this, right? I mean, not only this, right? We also the sycophancy, right? So that this model would like overly compliment, be providing compliments for barely, like not very non-intelligent suggestions, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So OpenAI had to withdraw a model to come back later to solve this problem. It is, you're very right, and I think you're touching on a very, very important point, because I think we are in a very interesting phase, right? And the phase is this. You're right. It has been trained on the internet, basically, right? And we, as humans, have built our culture, everything around language, right? Because language is how we communicate with each other. And so it with training over the whole internet, basically, it mastered language really better, I would say, than almost any human in this world. And empathy, which you touched upon, is ultimately very often in psychology regarded as how well can somebody articulate your own problem back to you, right? And because it masters language so well, it can actually be so empathetic. Like talking to it can feel really, really good. And oftentimes it can feel better than talking to a human, because it is doing a perfect job. Plus, it is available 24 hours. Like you can always talk to this thing. I think that's a very interesting thing. And at the same time, I think it is also interesting, because if we take the thought that we had before, which is that maybe models are not going to be trained in future anymore, but learn through instructions, right? Or they advance itself, right? Which we had already in AI scientists and so on. Then it is not anymore trained on human generated data, which means that there could be a future where AI will understand humans less than it understands it now, because now it is really trained on all human data, and then it will be trained on partly human data and partly data that it created itself. Right?
Yeah.
And it could go in a very different way.
I mean, it's an interesting slippery slope, I think, for me at least. And I think this is probably more reflection of my age than it is anything else. And I do think you need to think about it from a a demographic perspective, right? The adoption curve and how people leverage it. Like my kids are in university now. They've grown up with the internet. They've grown up with social media. The internet came about when I was, a young man, and the social media followed after that, right? Which I never really subscribed to. I never got deeply embedded in social media. The the type of interaction that my sons have is very, very different than the type of interaction that I had growing up and what I value. And so it's never lost on me. And maybe it's because partly my age and partly because I'm an engineer. It's never lost on me that whatever is speaking back to me is a machine, right? And no matter how empathetic it sounds, I
It
don't
is still,
I don't ascribe any human emotion to it at all. I don't
yeah,
get upset with it. I don't think it really cares how I'm doing. Like, I think it's just regurgitating what it's been trained to regurgitate, and it's doing it in a very well structured way. And it's giving, it's
true.
giving I've asked it to give me a very liberal perspective on an issue, a very conservative perspective on an issue, a woke perspective, like literally that term. And you'd be amazed at what, and maybe you probably already know, like how it comes back and provides feedback. Because inside of an organization, or when you're dealing with someone that you care about, you need to try and look at things from as many different perspectives as possible. And if your perspective is by default quite different than someone else's, my son has a very different view of the world than I do. And in many ways, his is, you know, I applaud his view of it. It's much more altruistic than mine. Mine is a bit more cynical. I think he'll eventually get there because life wears you down. But I do think that asking these tools to give a different perspective is an interesting way of using them as well.
I agree with you. Yes, I agree with everything you say. It's very interesting. It's just very interesting, right? And you can use it. I mean, they even released it, right? They even released a mode for learning. You can literally use it also to learn about others and about other viewpoints, because it's repeats everything very, very well. Before, you touched on agentic systems, right? And then you said you can use different AI models to code, and then one is refining and so on. So what's your experience with agentic systems? What are you doing with this, or what else? What's your experience?
Yeah, it ties in, I think, to the the future of how most organizations are going to run. I mean, and I do think it's a major threat to highly repetitive work. Whether it's to improve our own productivity or to facilitate automation of some series of tasks that have traditionally been done by human beings with computers, typically, of course, but trying to get to a point where it's more fully automated. I think it's fascinating stuff. Again, in in the spirit of, like, raising children, my sons are at a stage of their lives where this is such a new phenomenon for them. All this AI and agentic stuff, like guiding people to what it is that they can, what type of career path to take so that it's future proof to a certain degree. One son is interested in medicine, the other one is interested in law. And one of the things that I've said, and I'd be curious to see what your thoughts are on this, like separating the content creation from the content delivery is a piece that I try to instill in them. Meaning, my son that wants to be a lawyer, guaranteed AI is going to be doing a ton of the background research and, generating the legal briefs and things like that. Presenting the case to a jury, to a judge, and helping influence the way humans interpret the facts and details of a case to, be in favor of the plaintiff or the defendant, whatever. Um, that's a separation, right? AI will assist in generating the content. My kid will have to be able to deliver it in a meaningful way. My son, who wants to be a doctor, the research around what symptoms a patient presents with and what the underlying condition might be and what protocols could be used to treat and what drug interactions are healthy. Uh, That's going to be different than actually interfacing with the patient and having a human connection. But to your earlier point around the machines becoming, or sounding at least, more empathetic, I think there are going to be some people who are just fine with a robot standing in front of
Yeah.
them, talking to them, and not, not really caring, right?
I think you put it in a very interesting way, and I agree. And you put it in a very interesting way. Um, I haven't thought about it in that the way you said it, but I agree with you. It's very interesting. I usually say that AI is very good in knowing things, but not necessarily very good in doing things, which is something that came from this feud between Apple and Anthropic, and then universities coming in and writing some papers about this. But you put it in a very nice way. I think you're right. The necessity of a lawyer presenting it like on a stage, basically, especially in the United States, doing it in front of jurors, is an important task of it, which AI obviously cannot do as well as a human will do it, especially a good human will do it. And I also agree with you in medicine. I always said, when I was talking about AI and I'm teaching at the university, I always said that I want AI to do the diagnosis, but I want a human to tell me about this. Even I. But then again, if you look at Japan, right, where they have this, demographic issues with lots of elderly people. So the way they are solving it right now, actually already, is with robots. They're a small, cute robot, and it really seems that people, and these are elderly people, right? They're like 60, 70, 80, 90 years, really bond with these robots, like really, really bond with this robot. It's not my research field, so I don't have like lots of details there, but I've seen, a little bit and read a little bit. And it is fascinating how well we can ultimately do this. And it's surprising. To me, it's surprising. I agree with you. It's actually surprising, because you would assume that that's not the case.
Yeah, it's so I don't know how a great way to encapsulate all the things that we're talking about, but one of the things that another example I gave was, a concert, a music concert, right? Taylor Swift's tour went on. I didn't go to it. I'm not a massive Taylor Swift fan, but you cannot help but be impressed by the scale at which she performed this tour, right? And the revenue it generated, and the complexity of like the set changes and the costume changes and all these things, right? Like, I can't imagine someone wanting to go watch a bunch of robots do that. And I use that as an example, right? It could be, and I know Taylor Swift writes her own music, but it could be that AI writes future versions of her music and she still delivers it and performs it. And then somebody said, "Oh, have you heard about this AI band?" And it's a band, and I can't remember the name of it. I'm sure if you Google it, you can find it. There's a band that's been created that's completely AI, and they've released an album. And I'm thinking, it's like the 2025 version of Milli Vanilli, if you know who that is, right? If you're old enough to know who that is. And I'm like, okay, I don't get it. But having a robot diagnose less severe conditions, I think, is absolutely good for the world, right? Like, imagine a child having the flu or having COVID and being able to, instead of waiting in a queue to see a human being, have a machine be able to help diagnose that more quickly and prescribe the medicines to make the child feel better. If you've got cancer or some other
That's my
major
example. You don't
condition,
want AI tell you that.
yeah, to your point, right? You might be the type that absolutely needs the empathy of a human being.
Exactly.
If you're an elderly person and you're alone and you're away from your family,
Better than nothing.
a robot dog is better than nothing, right?
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
I guess it all just depends on the severity of the circumstances.
Yeah, you're very right. Because the actual question is not having a human to empathize with or having a robot. The question is having nothing or having a robot.
That's right.
You're right. That's a very different question.
That's right.
Yeah. Yes, that's very true. And I agree with you that a concert and so on. And it's actually not new, right? Think about this. Any watch that you can buy, like digital watch, right? That you can buy for, I don't know, €1 is better than than the best Richamil. But Richamil costs 120,000 and this costs €1. Like, how is that? Because there is so much difficulty in producing that, and we appreciate the difficulty of it, right? We appreciate the difficulty of Taylor Swift doing all those things, right? And if it will come too easy, then yeah. Uh, when we go back to these agentic systems, right? And you said you're using it for coding and so on, right? And you're using different models. You said for these the the I think that we entered basically from one paradigm to the other paradigm. So I'm very long in AI, right? And we had always in AI these phases where we have a paradigm, something new, right? And it's great, and we think we got it. That's it. We are these AGI is tomorrow, and then we have an AI winter of 10 years where everybody's, like this thing is not working. Right? I think what happened, or yeah, I think actually what happened is this: we went from one paradigm to the other without a winter, because the previous paradigm was neural scaling, like making it larger, 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 larger. That stopped working because, first of all, these news are actually not even larger. And even if they would be larger, they are not to the degree larger that it was before, right? But at the same time, the capabilities didn't stop, because now we are doing all these agentic things, right? Which, combining these things together. And I would like to understand your perspective. Why do you think that works? Because think of it this way: if I would take one neural network, right, and just make it larger, it should be, or theoretically, or one could make the claim, right, that should be as good or better than two smaller ones. But it turns out that that's not always the case. How do you feel about this, and what's your thought about that?
Well, I mean, I think if you're trying to mimic human abilities, humans tend to specialize in certain areas, right? And you don't go to your car mechanic for a dinner recipe, and you don't go to the chef at the restaurant to fix your engine, right? So, if you can describe and bound the problem set, why would you want, like, I think of, ChatGPT as, Wikipedia on steroids, right? And, and the ability to answer, detailed questions and lots of reasoning. But if I'm trying to solve, how do I change the brakes on my car? I don't need Wikipedia. I need the 3 pages in the auto manual that reference how to change the brakes on my car, right? So for me, it's a much more efficient way of getting to the answer. Now, I mean, I guess in reality, like, it would be a YouTube video, right? Because you want the visual sort of step-by-step understanding. But when you think about the cost of running these very large models for a very narrow problem set, it's not very, there's not really good economies of scale. But if you know that your agentic workflow is going to be bound by a particular set of inputs with an anticipated set of outputs, then have those models be as small as possible for 2 reasons. First, they're going to solve the problem more quickly. And then second, the compute costs of executing the model is hopefully going to be less, right? I mean, I think that's where you're seeing, again, I'm not in the research side of this. I'm much more of a practitioner of leverage what's been built. To me, the research scientists are, the equivalent of the engineers of the engines at Porsche, right? Like, these are, or the creators of compilers for programming languages. Like, these are amazing, amazing thought leaders and doing things. I'm the guy that wants to get in the car and drive it and appreciate the.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I think that though, 2 things that I would like to add. So I think that yes, Karpati, and they are amazing people, no question about it. But I also think, I would even say not think, that it's not something they understand, because nobody understands it. What we actually did is we just took an algorithm, right, and then we basically go through an evolutionary process on steroids, right? Like very, very fast. Evolution did 20 years with humans. There's 20 milliseconds, and basically that's what you're doing. And it's not. I don't think that any person can claim that we understand why something is happening this way, right? Because if that would be the case, you wouldn't have like so many different opinions of so many thought leaders, right? Like Jeffrey Hinton saying totally dangerous, Jan LeCun saying that's not even intelligent. What are you talking about? It's not dangerous, right? So I think that that's something. And then I think that with this agentic systems, what I think is so interesting is you're right that humans specialize. There's actually a theory about this that intelligence needs modularization. So you need intelligence actually, according to the theory, is actually the manifestation of conversation between different modules, right? And we are intelligent because our brain has different modules and they talk to each other and then something intelligent happens. So it's not a property of something, but a property of an interaction of several things with each other in that theory. And that would very much mimic what you just said, because humans do it the same way. But you have to ask yourself the question, yes, humans specialize, but we specialize for a reason, right? We specialize because we don't have time or interest to do everything. But this thing actually knows everything already. So it knows the cooking recipe and it knows how to do this, yet you tell it to specialize and something different comes out of it, right? So that's the trick side of it, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting if you think about it. Like, I've had the good fortune of being able to travel globally for the last 20 some years, and I've been to a lot of different countries, predominantly for work, but I always try to, tackle in some independent, like, leisure time. And I don't consider myself a global expert by any stretch, but I pay attention to the cultures of the countries that I visit, and going from whether it's Armenia or Macedonia or Tunisia or where lots of different places that I've been, Brazil, Japan, Philippines, Thailand, you name it. And I think human beings are fundamentally the same. Like they want to be around people they love. They want to be in a safe environment. They want to live a peaceful life. These are the common sort of characteristics. But I think what's evolved with human being and human nature, and maybe this is a bit more on Western civilization than some emerging places, is like no one wants to have difficult conversations anymore. No one wants to have things that aren't transactional. No one wants to have things that require paying a lot of attention and over a prolonged period of time. Everything is the gig economy of like, what minimum thing can I do to get a result? And then I move on to the next thing. And so I think the risk that we face as a species a bit is this notion that if these LLMs are doing things that simplify our lives and make things easier, how much are we going to even worry about the inner workings of it and the risks associated with it? And it's the affluent people, frankly, people that sit in our roles that benefit the most, right? We're getting vacuums that automatically vacuum our homes. We're getting, capabilities that, are planning our day or setting the meeting agenda and things like that, right? I worry that we're not going to take a critical eye because the convenience of it all makes up for whatever mystery or even evil that might be lurking beneath the surface, right? Who knows? I mean, I don't know. I see videos online where you see human beings beating a robot, right? You see examples of them with robots that are more humanoid-like, and they're walking, and you see somebody come up and intentionally, it's part of the research and development, and they hit the robot with a bat and they try to like break the robot. And I just remember watching it, and my initial reaction was like, wow, stop hitting the damn robot, right? But like, it's not nice to the robot. But then I'm like, the robot doesn't feel anything. Like, what's wrong with me? I don't know what the world's going to look like 25 years from now. I'm going to be maybe grateful that I won't be around for it.
Maybe you're right. I certainly see also lots of dangers there, but that's a separate topic. But you said something very interesting. You said that we are evolving into this direction, that everything needs to be bite-sized, easy, and so on. Do you have any idea why, or any thoughts of why this is? Is it natural to us, or is it the education system, or is it?
Oh, good Lord. I don't know. I mean, I'm no expert in this and certainly no psychologist. I will tell you from my own experience and in watching not only my sons, but children of friends and things like that, like our attention span has just gotten shorter and shorter. The screen has become the dominant thing. There was a photographer, I don't remember the name of it, of the person that did the photography, but they took pictures of people with their cell phones and they removed the cell phone from the image.
Oh,
And so you'll see, say, a family sitting around a table at a restaurant where everybody was on their cell phone and they're all just sort of staring at their hand. But in the photo, the phone is removed. So it's just an empty hand. And it's just, if you go out and you observe how people are, whether it's on public transportation, everybody's got their, you know, AirPods in, nobody's talking to each other. You know, even families aren't talking to each other as much anymore. I just see it as a slow degradation of, you know, having that, valuing human connection. And, you know, but in an era of convenience. I mean, you're now, things are getting done much more quickly through these devices. And so it's like you take the good with the bad, I suppose. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have any idea or answer to this either. I just, I also see the observations that you are seeing. It is that way, but I wouldn't also have no idea why. And it's also difficult to say how dangerous is it, right? Because one could argue a calculator, came out and then nobody was calculating numbers in their brain anymore. Is that something that we needed or not? I don't know. I think in Finland, I don't know. They stopped even writing with pens, but only with keyboard, I think. But then they're number one in PISA test, right? So I don't know. It's just an interesting question. I have also two daughters. So the opposite. Yes, two sons, right? I had two daughters, and I can see that their life was very, very different than mine because of technology, how it changed how they learn, social media, attention span, is all. And then COVID came, where they were so much at home. So first of all, you see your child more often, and then you just realize like how short this is, and so on. Yeah, it was. It's very different. I agree. It's very different. And when we go back to your work, right? In your work, you are building interesting things. Tell us whatever you can or want to tell us about.
Sure.
Object building.
Yeah. So, FIS is a global company. We've got thousands of customers. We build core banking software and capital markets software and handle a lot of the financial payments and transactions that flow globally. And so we're in this interesting position. And I think it's why my role is as fun and exciting as it is for me personally. We're in this interesting position where we've got a lot of the world's financial data and access to it. Now, we have agreements with customers in terms of how we protect the data and do those types of things, of course, and we honor those agreements. But within the context of being able to do data aggregation after we've done some anonymization treatment to the data and look at how consumers are spending, look at how banks are performing relative to their peers, we're able to do things with data sets and AI that we couldn't do before. We've built an end-to-end new data and AI environment for the whole firm. It's a global platform, so pieces of it get deployed globally in different Azure environments around the world. And we collect the data, of course, in region or in country, and respect all the data sovereignty rights issues. But we're able to do things at scale now with training models because, it's kind of like the LLMs getting trained on the world's information. We're now being able to train models in a much larger scale. And as I'm sure you know, right, the larger the data set is and the higher the quality of the data set is, the better the outcome is from the model, the predictive outcome, right? Whether it's a traditional statistical based model or it's a neural net, either way, like you want good quality data to be fed into these things during the training phase. And we are looking at, we provide a bunch of services. We build the core banking software, so the ledger for the bank and the user experience for the consumer to interact with that bank, for example. All those transactions flow through these cores. They get fed into this new environment and they become part of the overall ecosystem. We're able to then start building out agentic workflows that automate some of the back office and even front office capabilities of the bank. So take two really quick examples. An account opening experience. Most people open up banking accounts online or they go into a branch, right? much of the information that you start typing in to open up a bank account, you can, the moment you get just a few pieces of data, first name, last name, SSN, for example, a bunch of workflows can kick off in the background and run in real time using agents that are assessing risk, checking what other products you might already have, figuring out how to make recommendations on what's the best product to offer the customer if you're the banker sitting in his or her seat talking. The second is on the backside of it, which is fraud detection. So, take a look at fraud in the moment. Like, it's a bank is always incentivized to approve a transaction at a merchant because they make money off that transaction. Well, you want to not approve it if you think it's very high risk, of course, but even if you do approve it and you think the risk is low, imagine launching a bunch of agentic capabilities on the back end of that to really look at spend behavior, to take a more detailed look at, like, what store did you buy at? Is this a store that you frequently purchase at? How close is it to your workplace? How close is it to where you live? Is it on that route, the common routes that you would take between work and home? There's a bunch of things that we can do in a very automated way that don't involve human beings at all, that I think will provide more value to the end customer and to the bank itself, because it's going to stave off fraud, which is things that they, of course, have to write off and lose money on.
That's wonderful. I imagine this really to be very powerful with all the data that you have, right? Because as you said yourself, FS is really a global organization, and then I'm sure you also have enough compute, so you can really build on scale, like huge scale systems, right? Yeah, and which of course brings you back to your distributed systems career, right? Where you started basically in, yes. And let me, as a last question, what do you think the next 5 years are going to be in AI? Are we going to see this growth, or is it going to flatten, not flatten, good, bad? I don't know. Whatever you want to predict here.
I mean, it's hard to say. Like, again, not being on the research side of it, like the amount of content to train on just continues to be out there, right? Like, new books are written, new research is done, papers are published, new shows are done. At some point, the big feeder into all of this is human creativity, right? Think about asking an LLM to generate a new genre of music, for example. I don't know if it could. Maybe it could. Maybe it synthesizes from others. I think humans are going to be the ones to likely do that. I don't know if you created a new genre of music, for example. How do you test whether or not that's any good? I mean, what's done today is a band shows up, they play in an audience, and the audience responds, and the audience either the music resonates with them or it doesn't, and it resonates in a larger audience and still larger and larger, right? And it's like how you see, like, punk rock, rap, all these different types of music emerge. That's all human, ingenuity. This is all human creativity. I don't know if machines are going to get to the point of just, they're going to create the next genre of music and humans won't be involved in that loop. So that's what I'm interested in, is like, how does society evolve? How do we as a species, right? Forget that you can, like, it's interesting. It's like, I don't remember who said it, but the fact that you can do something with science doesn't necessarily mean you should.
Yeah,
right?
correct. Yeah.
And, how do you have enough guardrails to protect the species for surviving, the next 1,000 years?
Yeah, you're right. That these are interesting and very important problems, right? I think to say it positively, and I'm usually, this is fun because usually I'm not positive, but today I'm positive. So to say it positively, we had like a few moments in life where we did that, right? We did it with Atoms for Peace, where the United States created ultimately a safer world, right? Than if only one country would own all nuclears, right? And then we did it with stem cell research and germ cells and so on. So I think there have been moments where, so we can be hopeful. Chris, thank you very much for doing this. Very, very insightful, very interesting conversation.
Yeah, appreciate your time.
No, thank you, and good luck with all the things that you're doing in AI.
Yeah, let's circle back, some months from now and see how much has changed since we last spoke.
We'd love to.
Right?
Exactly.
We'll see how well this conversation ages. Probably not well.
Yes, you're right. We should do that. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Very good. Thanks. Cheers.